Welcome to FarmLand. Coming up on this evening's show, Pat Smith of the Micro-Renewable Energy Federation will outline his views on sustainable farming and Brexit. The ICSA's Eddie Punch talks beef prices and calf to beef production, plus the IFA's Thomas Cooney reacts to the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Climate Action's new report. But first, what kind of savings can solar technology offer farmers? Breffney O'Brien has this report.
This week we visited Brady's pig farm in Carrickboy, County Longford, to take a look at how the farm is using renewable energy to its benefit. Dermot explained how the idea to install the solar panels came about.
Well, we just decided we were to put up a new shed, and we just decided it was facing the right way and it was a long roof, so we just kind of decided we'd put up the solar panels and just do a little bit for the environment, you know. We'd have a big pull on power, so we just kind of decided if we could cut our costs a bit, and we were told we'd have the repayment in 5 years, so we just decided we'd give it a go and see how we do.
Dermot noted that the installation process was hassle-free and didn't affect the normal working process on the farm.
The company came and measured up and seen where they were going, and they came and they had them fitted in about a week, so they were up and running in about a week and a half after the start. Well, it's the full length of a 10-bay shed. We put them in last July, and sure, it was a great summer last year. We had lots of sun, so there was a good result from them last summer, or our first year in them. So we're not that sure yet, but definitely there is a big saving. You need the direct sunlight, alright, but if it's a bright sort of a day, you would be getting a draw off them. Like, I have an app on my phone there and I can keep an eye on it, so I can see what we're getting off them most days. It just tells you exactly what's happening. It tells you how much your solar is coming off your solar panels and how much you're drawing off your grid.
He noted that his system needs no energy storage unit because the power is used on farm instantly.
We haven't got any batteries because there's such a demand on power here in the piggery, so it's just been feeding back into our power, and then the grid feeds up then whatever the solar panels can't do. There was an investment. There was a little over 100,000, and there was a grant then as well, a 30% grant, so that was another reason why we decided we'd do it with the grant there, you know. And sure, it's the way things are going, we have to be doing something for the carbon footprint. The last summer, with the good summer, there was a saving, so I think definitely it's the way to go. Well, in the winter, definitely, if there was a bright day, you would see it would be feeding into your system, all right. There's not much maintenance on them. They're a glass panel, they're up there, they're self-cleaning, and there's very little maintenance with them. You wouldn't even see them up on the roof, no, definitely not, no.
We're joined now by Pat Smith, the chairman of the Micro-Renewable Energy Federation and the CEO of Renewable Energy Company, Local Power Limited.
Evening, Claire.
Pat, thanks for coming in to us. Pat, as Dermot Brady outlined there, farmers are trying to do their bit for the environment, and renewable energy is really the mindset for them at the moment. But yet on the idea of converting solar energy directly into electricity on farms, the figures are very low out there. Less than 1% of our energy production in Ireland is coming from solar, compared to much larger percentages on the wind, hydro, biomass side of things. What's your view on why Ireland is in that kind of precarious position with solar at the moment? Because potentially that's something that could help us avoid large EU fines down the road.
Claire, without a doubt, I think solar PV historically was seen as expensive. However, in the last 10 years, it's dropped by 90% in cost. Solar energy generation is very predictable. The output, as you saw there from Dermot, the install that we done on his farm, we predict that it'll generate 95,000 kilowatt hours a year. It will do that, and it's fully monitored. It's also low maintenance. We have 5,000, I believe, enough roof space to generate about 5,000 megawatts of solar of energy every year in Ireland. I think the price reducing, energy costs going up, and the new grants that's been introduced. The Minister for Energy introduced a grant for homes to put solar PV and battery storage in their homes. And we very much welcome the fact that Minister Creed just announced a grant for farmers under TAMS to put solar PV on their farms.
And just on that, Pat, although you've welcomed it, that's the 10 million under TAMS for funding for efficient and renewable energy technologies, but you also contend that further action is needed there. Why is that?
Yeah, in my opinion, there's a lot has to be done. the farming community are all different sizes and scales. And as you saw there on Dermot's farm, he got support for a 100 kilowatt system. There's many farms out there that can justify that size of system. What Minister Creed has brought forward is a much less ambitious overall limit. But it's a start, and we welcome that. I also think that ESB networks and the policymakers need to make grid access free for microgeneration, and they need to prioritise grid access for microgeneration. There's policy decisions that can be made that will encourage farmers, and particularly the agribusiness sector, to adopt this technology, because they're all very conscious of sustainability.
And what type of enterprises are most suitable to the likes of the PV solar? Is it more on the intensive side?
I think solar is very modular. You can size the system so that you consume all of the energy outside or on-site. You can divert surplus energy to heat the water. You can divert to battery storage, or you can divert to charge electric vehicles. So I think the important thing is that farmers get the proper technical advice so that when they install their system, that they use all of their own energy, because that's going to ensure that they get the quickest payback. But I also think within 2 years, legally, the country will have to allow farmers access to export to the grid. But there's lots of technical issues that have to be overcome. And I think ESB networks in particular have to basically lead the way on that.
Because you did point out that that the grants could be expanded at the earliest opportunity to facilitate more intensive and higher energy use, particularly on dairy farms. Yeah. And I'm just interested, Pat, on where you see, I suppose, the different sectors and the different enterprises going in the future, maybe over the next 5 to 10 years. We have a new CAP coming, and will this type of technology be more suitable to those? Maybe are we going to have more intensive farms in the future where this solar might be?
Well, I think the structural change that's happening in farming is accelerating. The decisions that was made to allow farmers to lease their land in a tax efficient manner, and for people to take land on a long-term basis in a tax efficient manner, was very significant in helping farmers scale up. But the one key that I would say to all farmers is sustainability. And sustainability means they must be profitable, they must be efficient, they must be conscious of the environment, they must have a life. So there's lots of issues that I believe that the farming community have to grapple with in the context of sustainability going forward. But a key part of that is renewable energy. And I see real opportunities. In my opinion, solar PV will be on every farm in the country in 10 years' time.
Pat, moving on to Brexit. You've mentioned before that ultimately you see that, well, this was about a year and a half ago, you were saying that you thought it would be ultimately a soft outcome on Brexit, that the EU, the UK and Ireland would work in the best interests of the three. We're moving very, very quickly to a dangerous cliff edge, to a possible no deal scenario. Has your assessment on the situation changed? And do you think enough is being done from an Irish standpoint to protect Irish agriculture, particularly the beef sector, which is hugely exposed?
Look, I did say that the UK would break their necks the nearer they got to the wall of Brexit, because it is a huge jump to have to take. I think we're all aghast at the political shenanigans that's going on over in the UK. I wish the political system well in trying to come to an acceptable solution. I still believe that my prediction of a year and a half ago is very likely. But as we all know, a day, not alone a week, is a long term in politics.
And what about the beef sector then in particular? Do you think that there's enough? So we don't know the details of this potential no deal package that will be there for agriculture, but are you confident that that the government has done enough to protect the sector?
I think that the beef sector in particular is challenged, and they need all the help they can get. It's very difficult, though, to show your hand as to exactly what you're going to do in advance of knowing what exactly is going to happen. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. But I do believe that the government is astutely conscious of the potential impact on agriculture. And I'm sure behind the scenes, they're working very hard in Europe to make sure that the supports are in place should the worst case scenario happen.
Pat, obviously you were the former CEO of the IFA. Do you have any intention of revisiting that time in your life or sharing your story?
Certainly, Claire, I'd be delighted to talk to you sometime about my time in the IFA and about farm politics generally. But look, for obvious reasons, I won't be discussing what happened in the run-up to my departing the IFA. If you want comment on that, you'll have to talk to others. I believe that the IFA and farmers need a strong united voice. And look, I wish the IFA well in the years ahead, but happy to come back and talk to you anytime.
Pat, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for coming in to us. And now, beef prices. What's the trade like at the moment? Here's a report from Niall Claffey.
Farmers and finishers marketing beef cattle continue to battle against the odds this week, with quotes largely unchanged across the board. In recent times, low base prices are hampering any chance of farmers making a profit. Looking back to the very same week in 2018, €4.10 a kilo was on the table for steers, while heifers were quoted 10 cents higher at €4.20 a kilo. This week, factory buyers are quoting €3.70 a kilo for steers and €3.80 a kilo for heifers, excluding quality assurance bonuses. To put this into context, a 380 kilogram base steer carcass was worth the equivalent of €1,558, excluding bonuses this time last year. The potential returns have now dropped to €1,406. The lower factory quotes have left farmers and winter finishers counting the costs and have also raised serious concerns over the attractiveness of the enterprise. And, to add to this, the uncertainty surrounding Brexit has left farmer confidence very challenged. Moving to the cow trade, most beef cattle buyers are starting negotiations with farmers at €3 a kilo for R-grade cows and €2.80 to €2.90 a kilo for O-grade types. Looking at cows falling into the P category, these animals are selling at €2.60 to €2.70 a kilo. U-grading cows are hitting the €3.20 a kilo mark. Again, these prices are well back on the prices on offer this time last year. Furthermore, weight penalties are causing some farmers problems when it comes to marketing their bulls. Procurement managers are quoting €3.20 to €3.40 a kilo for O-grade bulls, while R-grades are moving for €3.40 to €3.50 a kilo. In addition, €3.50 to €3.65 a kilo is on the table for U-grade bulls. However, with a drop in the number slaughtered across the board in recent weeks, will there be more pressure on beef processors to pay more for their raw material?
We're joined now by Eddie Punch, the General Secretary of the ICSA. Thanks for coming up to us, Eddie. Eddie, at a time where there's so much uncertainty around the beef sector, particularly Brexit waiting in the wings, some factories have decided to pull down the price of cattle. What is the ICSA and what are you yourself doing to try and reverse the situation?
Yeah, look, we've had protests outside meat factories, but the issue at the moment is there's a lot of cattle and factories are taking huge advantage of the surplus of cattle that have been available throughout the winter and the early spring period. I think at this stage our focus is on live exports. It's got to be more and more live exports, and lucky enough, I think there are signs now that Turkey is re-emerging as a potential destination for cattle. We also know there are some cattle going out to Libya this week as well. And we can't have enough live exports because it's quite clear that the meat industry is unable to deliver a reasonable price to farmers for the amount of stock we have. And we see a number of things here. We think that the Cherbourg blockage needs to be sorted and fast. And I think the dairy industry has a responsibility here to, for a very small amount of money, put in place, fund the extra layerage facilities that are required in Cherbourg. We need to get as many of the dairy calves out of this country as possible, even the dairy beef cross calves, because these calves are not returning a viable price to farmers who are putting them through calf to beef systems here. And worse still is the fact that all of these extra dairy calves are dragging down the price of beef for everybody. We have too many calves, and the beef industry has demonstrated time and time again that it will be absolutely ruthless in cutting price to farmers for every excuse possible. And obviously with Brexit now, it's a really difficult time for farmers.
Eddie, you mentioned there about the dairy industry taking responsibility for the funding of new layerages out at Cherbourg. Yeah, how could that work? How would that possibly work?
Simple.
What about live exporters? Should they also feed into that?
Well, you see, the fact is we've had massive focus on dairy expansion. And look, that's a fine thing for people who are involved in dairying. But it is unrealistic and unfair that the costs of dairy expansion are being visited on the beef farming sector. So all of these extra calves are contributing to the glut of cattle. And we can't see any way in which farmers can make a realistic profit out of feeding some of particularly the Jersey cross and Kiwi cross calves. Well, some of those are not suitable for any markets, but the focus on dairying has not been to provide a calf that's suitable for a profitable calf to beef system. So in our view, the government, ideally should fund the Cherbourg lairage, but they're not going to do it, it seems, because there are issues about spending money in another member state. There is nothing to stop the dairy industry paying, and this is tiny money, Claire, to pay for extra lairage facilities in Cherbourg. They've got to accept that they're making a lot of profit out of all these extra cows that are being milked, but the extra calves are undermining the profitability of beef farming system.
Eddie, we're almost out of time, but we had the Minister on the show last week and we discussed the possibility of a review of the beef grid. As you mentioned, now he said the department would be willing to facilitate a review if it's what the industry and farmers want. Is that something you'd take him up on?
We would, yeah, because the grid is penalising farmers with poor cattle. But farmers with good quality cattle are being squeezed because they're too heavy, they're too this, they're too that. Nobody is getting the benefit. It's not cost neutral anymore. And we think it's also far too complex. And we'd like to see a simplified grid that delivers real margins to quality cattle.
Eddie, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us. And next, what lies ahead for agriculture after the Oireachtas Committee published its climate action report? Here's Sylvester Phelan.
The Joint Oireachtas Committee's newly published Climate Action Report includes a lengthy section on Irish agriculture. Ireland is already on course to miss its 2020 targets, with the country coming under increased international pressure to meet its 2030 emissions objectives. The committee decided against imposing a carbon tax on greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture, as had been recommended by the Citizens' Assembly for the moment. The Oireachtas Group did, however, call for the implementation of Teagasc's mitigation pathways, which consist of A. Agricultural mitigation through improved breeding, changing fertiliser types and slurry spreading. B. Land use and carbon sequestration through increased broadleaf forestry and improved pasture management. And C. Energy efficiency and fossil fuel displacement through biofuel and anaerobic digestion. The committee called on the Department of Agriculture, as well as Teagasc and the Environmental Protection Agency, to undertake a review of nitrogen fertiliser management and imports in 2019. The report highlights that the agri-industry can become a net producer of electricity such as solar power. A review of electricity market rules has been called for to enable micro-generated electricity to be sold to the grid. Anaerobic digestion is also highlighted, with calls made on the government to commission a feasibility assessment for the development of biogas. The committee recommends the establishment of biogas cooperatives, along with the facilitation of installations with low-interest loans or grants. A national review of land use to optimise planning and help tackle carbon emissions is recommended too. It is aided by CAP and national funding. On the forestry front, the committee seeks stronger incentives for farmers and landowners to plant broadleaf species instead of conifers. Finally, the Oireachtas body also proposes the re-wetting of peatland and bogs, seeking the rollout of bog rehabilitation on all designated bogs. While farm organisations have broadly welcomed the outworkings of the report, the full picture on how agriculture will be decarbonised remains open for further debate.
Thomas Cooney, the chairman of the IFA's Environment and Rural Affairs Committee, joins us now. Thomas, thanks for coming in to us.
Thanks, Claire.
Thomas, last week the Oireachtas Committee on Climate Action produced their recommendations for Ireland on tackling climate change, and with a specific section on agriculture. And although I suppose in the report they said that this time around they wouldn't be looking at a carbon tax on agriculture, but in the long term, Thomas, is that something that farmers need to be seriously concerned about or considering?
I don't think so, because I don't think it would contribute anything to reducing overall global emissions, because we're one of the most sustainable places in the world to produce beef and dairy. Our dairy farmers are the most carbon efficient in Europe. Our beef farmers are in the top 5. There's very little difference between 1 and 5. I think common sense prevailed at the Oireachtas Committee last week, where they took on board the recommendations of the Teagasc roadmap for climate roadmap. And there's 28 measures in that, and they see that as the way to go forward, because putting a carbon tax and reducing production in Ireland would only encourage production in less carbon efficient countries such as South America and Brazil and Argentina and places like that, and would contribute to overall global emissions. And I think the approach that they took, recommending the adaptation of the Teagasc climate roadmap, is a more sensible approach, because we are a sector with a plan, and it has the potential to put money into farmers' pockets and to reduce emissions at the same time.
And Thomas, just on the Teagasc mitigation plan, with the 28 measures to reduce or to enhance agricultural mitigation. So you're looking at improved breeding strategies, changing fertiliser types, slurry spread and land use for carbon sequestration, improved pasture management. How far along are farmers on those types of practices at the moment? And what about funding for pushing through on that roadmap?
Yeah, there is a number of those measures being done through the KT programme, through the GLOS programme, 50,000 farmers in the GLOS scheme at the moment. We have our own IFA Smart Farming initiative, which is aimed at reducing costs, reducing emissions. There's a direct link between the two, and efficiency at farm level, increasing profitability, driving down emissions. But going forward, we need a well-funded CAP, and we have the CAP reform coming up, and there is talk of a 5% cut, which would equate to 100 million. We need a well-funded rural development scheme going forward, because we need a like a reps type scheme, where there's 10,000 per farm, and that's what IFA policy is, and that won't come if we have an overall cut in the CAP budget. Government contribution does need to be increased as well, and it makes sense. It makes sense for government and the EU to spend the money on this, and get the investment in farm, drive down emissions, and not for Ireland to be paying fines. It's better to put the money into farmers' pockets and encourage all the other renewables incentives like solar and AD.
Yeah, just on that, Thomas, energy efficiency is highlighted particularly in the report, and about the move away from fossil fuels towards more biofuels or anaerobic digestion, as you mentioned there. But yet, there have been delays with the opening of the support scheme for renewable heat. The grant was announced last year. The second phase was meant to be announced earlier this year. Now, the Department of Climate Action is pushing it back maybe till the middle of the year. So how serious is the government about bringing in anaerobic digestion as a possible solution to climate mitigation on the agricultural side?
Well, the fact that it's recommended in this report, Oireachtas report, is good. Minister Bruton will be doing up a whole of government report in the next month or so, and it's going to be taken from the recommendations of the Oireachtas report. We had him in at our AGM. We put all those issues to him for the need to develop farm scale and community-based renewables. AD will probably be community-based. We need farm scale solar, all that sort of stuff. There is efficiencies can be done at farm level. There is some grants there, but they need to be increased as well, and we need to get uptake on that, because again, the government would be better spending the money on that than it going off to Europe and fines. And that's what is going to happen, like post 2020, if we don't hit our targets, and if we're seen to be spending the money and investing in farm businesses, that's the only way that it can be done. We are the only sector that has a plan. There's no other. We have emissions spiralling out of control in transport. There's no plan there.
Aviation as well, as we saw this week.
Aviation as well. We are a sector with a plan, but we need investment. We need government investment. It will help to sustain farmers on the farms as well. If they can make money from solar or AD, it will help sustain their farm businesses as well.
Thomas, as well, this week the government announced a fund of 3 million to be made available for the purchase and operation of drones to survey illegal dumping. You've raised some concerns on the prosecution side.
Yeah.
So how could this fund be best used to target the culprits.
The fund is welcomed, and we had been calling. We had a big campaign there post Christmas, and we mentioned it to the minister as well, Minister Bruton, when we had him in at our AGM. It was another thing that we have follow-up meetings with the department on that as well. But we need prosecutions. We need people to be made an example. We're getting calls from all over Ireland where farmers are having literally trailer loads of rubbish dumped in their fields. There needs to be people made an example of, and a hefty fine put on them and made an example of, as to use them as a deterrent. The drones will help to catch them, and the other enforcement measures, and hopefully there will be more boots on the ground as well. And it's all welcome, but we need prosecutions and need people to be made an example. And we want the government to publish a list of what prosecutions that they have. You know, that's what we haven't got that yet of them.
And Thomas, there also is a public consultation on the nitrates derogation at the moment that's underway. How concerned should farmers be about that, and how important is it for them to take an active stance and to voice their opinions?
Yeah, well, I think farmers have taken a fairly active stance. They've spent over 2 billion in the last 10 years upgrading their farms, let it be slurry storage, nutrient management planning. You know, we have 7,000 farms in the derogation. It's important that the derogation is protected going forward. And we will be doing everything to ensure that we do get the derogation renewed again. This is only a review of the derogation. There will be a full nitrates review in 2 years' time, where we hope to get the derogation renewed for a further 4 years. And so hopefully farmers won't be penalised for they're doing the right thing.
Okay, and finally, Thomas, we're out of time, but I still have to ask you. You have recently put your name forward for the deputy presidency of the IFA. Now we are a number of months out from the election, but why did you put your hat in the ring, and what are the priorities and changes that you intend to campaign on?
I put my name forward because I felt I've enjoyed delivering over the last couple of years. You know, like we did get 700,000 off the Department of the Environment there for waste hire management. We got the derogation renewed. We had the likes of the litter campaign, the delivery on the Oireachtas climate report, where the Citizens Assembly recommendations were. But I feel that's not enough. I feel I want to deliver more for the organisation. I want to be part of an organisation. I want to put pride back into the jersey, to the IFA jersey again. I want to be part of an organisation that campaigns on the streets, that organises tractorcades, that stands outside of the factory gates and delivers for farmers and delivers a sustainable income for farmers going forward.
Thomas, I'm sure we'll have you back in on the campaign trail over the coming months, so thanks for joining us. And that's it for this week's show. If you have a story, get in touch with us on any of our platforms. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.